Welcome to the Joe Moglia Podcast, featuring Hall of Fame football coach and world-renowned business leader, Joe Moglia. Let's join the host of the Joe Moglia Podcast, Jamie King.
Thank you very much, Mike Kelly, for that outstanding introduction. And we are so excited to be with you for another edition of the Joe Moglia Podcast. And without further ado, do you know what time it is, by the way?
It's Moglia Podcast time.
It's Joe time.
Joe time.
Not to be confused with Showtime, but
good. I got it.
Okay. Coach, we got so much to get to. We got President Trump. He is in China with President Xi. Summit of the decade, they're calling it. They've got so much going on there in terms of the pomp and circumstance. Seems like President Xi wants to get his points across about Taiwan. That's his big hurdle he wants crossed by the U.S. We want the Strait of Hormuz open. We want to have things working out together. The president of China said, hey, make America great again. That was kind of nice to hear. Your thoughts on this colossal meeting and what's your takeaway so far?
Well, no, I think in general, certainly, it's always better. I mean, we live in an age where we can communicate anytime we want to, which is a tremendous advantage. But we can't do that exclusively and never interact, especially when you're as significant in the world and what's going on geopolitically as the leaders of the United States and China are. So I like the fact that Trump brought, maybe 15 or 20 business people with him. I think that was good.
And I thought you might have made the flight at the last minute. Maybe no. To make it all work.
Yeah, I think most of those guys were trillion-dollar companies. So I'm not in that category, JB.
But you are the only person I've ever known in my life that used the word trillion in a sentence and actually had something to do with it. And hey, if anybody ever asks me, I'll say I have one guy that I ever had say the word trillion, and that's this guy right here, Joe Moglia.
$1 trillion in assets.
There you go. Unbelievable.
So I applaud both of them for doing that, and the effort they've got to take to be able to go through the diplomacy and welcome each other. But there's some really very difficult things going on in the world, and the reality is they're not big fans of ours, although they really need us from an economic perspective, and they need us and want us as their trading partner.
Right.
Frankly, we need them and want them as our trading partner as well.
Right.
That's important to us. So we want to be able to get that right. Now, since that's in both of our best interests, my guess is they can work something out there. And that's also, even if the president can't work something out, that's why you have the respective business leaders there that maybe within their particular company, they can work something out. All those things I think are positive. But at the end of the day, we have very, very different philosophical differences. They are a socialist communist state. Their standard of living is not very, very good at all.
Human rights violations, Coach?
Yeah, and that as well. And but it's a powerful, powerful country. Not the standard of living for the individual family, but it's a powerful, powerful country. And they have nuclear weapons, and they are probably very close to, even if not maybe ahead of us with regard to some of the technology. Hopefully, we're a little bit more ahead on AI, but we don't know that. They're not going to tell us exactly where they are. And probably the most important thing they've got is Taiwan. Now, we know we have to have Taiwan because we can't trust the Chinese totally taking over when they're the greatest provider of chips in the world. But China feels the exact same way. And China also feels that at one point, Taiwan was part of China, so they have more of a right to it. Right. From a cultural perspective. At the end of the day, I think unless you want to have a serious war, and remember, the United States and China don't want that because of the economic trading and the ability and our ability and the potential to accomplish something there. So if that's the case, I think you continue to have Taiwan, as an independent. And it continues as is, and it can do business with China, it can do business with the United States. But I can appreciate where it's not in our best interest to just let China take it over.
And what do you think? It seemed like President Xi was very stern in talking about Taiwan, saying that, things could be in great jeopardy if you don't work with us on this and help us have what we want. And it's kind of putting Trump in kind of is back to the wall. So you kind of got to navigate this and try to give something without giving everything. It's not a very good spot to be in.
Well, I don't think we want to just say that it's okay for you guys to come in and take over Taiwan. So I don't think that's the point I think we were talking about. There's no reason why we can't live because we have very strong trade partners. Right. And each country can make a lot of money and our respective citizenry can benefit from that. But at the end of the day, we can't afford to have the Chinese who we don't necessarily trust, right, who don't necessarily have our best interests at heart, right? Clearly don't have our best interests at heart, totally different culturally and philosophically, economically, politically. And so my guess it continues as is.
I think the word is civil. They need us. We need them. We need to, work together. But let me ask you something, and I've always wondered this, what your take might be. I saw a 60-minute special about the purchasing of American land by the Chinese near American bases, thousands upon thousands of acres. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, what would happen if we said, hey, President Xi, we'd like to get some land in the China region near some Chinese bases? Would that be okay? I think it would be a hard no. But for us, we're supposed to allow it. And it just seemed to me like it's not very smart of us to allow this to happen. And maybe, and hopefully everybody's watching this, but to see some of the land that has been purchased near some of these military installations is more than scary, Coach. I mean, it's something that really raises, pun intended, a red flag. How do you like that? Red flag?
I heard. I got it, Jay.
Thanks, Coach.
No, I think, you make a great point. I think, again, it goes back to serious cultural, political, and economic differences. We are a capitalist economy with a democratic political system. They are a communist economy with a socialist political system. Those are opposites. Now, there's certainly some spots where we meet in the middle, but they're really opposites.
Right.
So if we have all these people, regardless of where they come from, they just happen to come from China, coming in and buying our land. Well, we have people that own the land and want to sell it for top dollar.
Right.
So it's in those people in best interest to be able to do that. China says to their people, we'll let you know what's in your best interest. Right. So I can see why they would tell us no, because the Chinese government will make that decision. I think if somebody's coming in and buying a plot of land for me, I'm probably the one that makes that decision.
When you look at the congregation, as you mentioned earlier, he arrived, Trump did, in Beijing with one of the most powerful delegations in the history of delegations. Yeah. Elon Musk, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, Apple's Tim Cook, BlackRock's Larry Fink, Boeing's CEO, analyst from China are excited to meet with these folks. What was your take on all these guys agreeing? Because you're talking about trillionaires in many cases with these guys in terms of their business holdings. What do you think about the congregation and the end result? What was your take when you first heard about this and these guys all going and ladies going?
Yeah, now they're not trillionaires. They happen to run trillion dollar companies.
Yeah.
I think it was a great idea. I think they represent, as many of them as are over there. They have different things that they care about that they don't want to talk about. So Tim Cook probably wants to talk about something in the mobile phone industry. Jensen, he's going to want to talk about something AI related. I could see, Musk could talk about anything, right? I can see him talking about space travel. I can see him talking about, electric vehicles, although I think he's well past electric vehicles now. So each of them brings a specialty to the table that they would want to be able to figure out a good business deal with their counterpart in China. So I think all those things are positive. If the president's not able to get anything done diplomatically and has to pull away, that doesn't mean we may not be able to get many business deals done that could benefit both countries. So I think that was a very, very smart move.
Michael Lacasse, who was a longtime friend of mine, he was in the Orioles farm system, a big investor. He's told me today that he's invested in NVIDIA with Jensen Huang and doing quite well. And he says he appreciates all your advice all the time because he really wants to get ahead of the game and he appreciates what you're doing. But this NVIDIA is really doing well, Coach. It's something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, NVIDIA. Well, yeah. I mean, I've owned NVIDIA for a while, and it's a great play. If you have a portfolio that's supposed to have any equity in it, unless you're ultra conservative. You should own the major technology companies. Yeah. And of those, probably the number one I would own is NVIDIA. I'm sure I've said that on the show.
We found out here at home today, 52 senators, 177 congressmen sent a formal letter to President Trump demanding he reject any Iran deal in terms of allowing them the uranium enrichment to continue. That's a major bipartisan statement from Capitol Hill. When you hear that, it seems like that's a non-starter. And so many people, General Keane, who I saw recently, he said, we need to go in there and finish the job and get this done. And I'm a big fan of General Keane, Fordham guy, by the way.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But your thought on the bipartisan approach to get this thing as far as that message of no more uranium?
I think I'm delighted to see some leadership out of our Congress instead of fighting each other something and what's really the best long-term interests of our country, and allowing people or not allowing people to have nuclear weapons that could bring an end to the entire planet who hate us. I think that's kind of, for me, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. You got to give Trump credit because I don't know if any other president would have gone in there. But now I think you give the Democratic side of our political system a pat on the back for saying, this is what we're supposed to do, let's go get it done. Now, yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging General Keane is a Fordham guy. I don't know if you ever shared this with you, but I think you're aware I'm only the fourth guy in Fordham history to win the 3 major awards. But the Hall of Honor, which was the biggest award, I was awarded that along with General Keane.
Yes.
General Keane. That was very, very special, man. He doesn't know who I am, but certainly I appreciate, for him to accomplish a 4-star in the Army, not having come from West Point. That was the big deal. We know ROTC. That's an incredible accomplishment. Most of those guys went to the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, or West Point. But that's he certainly appreciate his service and what he's done for our country. And if I'm military, I would listen to the guy.
Absolutely. Well, you two are great leaders in your own respective, specialty areas. You've done it in the business world. You've done it in the football field. He's done it leading the military. Just an amazing. Fordham, a tremendous school, and you're so proud of it, as you should be. I did want to mention, you mentioned the war as it is, the 14-point peace plan. Are we going to get a deal, Coach? I mean, it seems to me like instead of 14, 20 points, 15 points, to narrow the scope down. You're one of the great negotiators out there and one of the great deal makers. What would your approach be if you could? Would you kind of narrow the scope down to maybe 4 or 5 points so we could really get this deal done, or just throw out 15 or 20 and hope for hope's sake, if you would?
The reason why you throw out 15 or 20 is because there's always something in a negotiation you've got to give in on. Well, that gives them a lot of things to be able to give in on. Right. And one of the things that I feel pretty strongly about, what do we want? We want no Iranian missiles or nuclear capability. The Strait of Hormuz has to be open, but that's for everybody's benefit,
right? Not
just theirs. We want to make sure that they're not the ones in charge, so they can shut it down anytime they want to. So that's a big deal for us. I think in return, though, I think the one thing we do have, because we have no problem printing it, is money. And I think for us to be able to give them, I would write them a big check. And I want the Strait of Hormuz, no one have responsibility there. I want free access to check on nuclear weapons, and no nuclear weapons, no uranium. And in return, here's what we're going to do.
Coach,
the country's on its ass. The country's not doing well, but they still have military power.
Right. Don't you think, though, if President Trump somehow got with President Xi and said, hey, look, can you lend a little air support, a little ground support, whatever it may be, and let's through the waterways, and let's get this strait open for the betterment, as you mentioned, of everybody. Iran's not going to like it, obviously, and China may have to lean on them a little bit. But for the world to open up the strait so everybody has what they need, do you think that's a play that would happen, or do you seem like it won't?
I can see that being a conversation. Why? Because it's in both of their best interest. But again, remember, Iran, they make their money with oil, and they got to get through the strait too.
Yes.
Right. So not getting through the strait has been preventing them from receiving the revenue that they would normally receive from energy efforts. So it's in Iran's best interest to get the strait open. The issue is not the strait being open. Everybody acknowledges that's supposed to happen. It's they don't want Iran to have control over it, so they can choose to shut it down if they choose to.
All right,
so you want to take away control of the strait from Iran.
Of the strait, yep.
The issue, yeah.
You are watching and listening to the Joe Moglia Podcast. We thank you for joining us. We're going to turn the page to the economy, and we're going to look at the inflation is back worse than expected. This week's producer price index came in at 1.4 for April, nearly triple what analysts expected, and the PPI surged 1% against an estimate of 0.4 year over year. Coach, your thoughts on the inflation aspect, and you've talked about being careful in your approaches to investing and looking at things as probably more likely a long play here. Your thoughts on the explosion here of the PPI?
People in our country, families that are fortunate enough to have a little bit of wherewithal, this doesn't hit them. They're aware of it, but it doesn't really hit them. But for the average family in our country, regardless of what geographic climate you come from, they feel the price of oil. They're aware prices in the supermarkets are high. That has been an issue for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So we've really not solved that problem. There's no question things are going to stay high as long as there's a crisis in the Middle East, period. That's why it's in everybody's best interest to open up the strait. But again, open it up without Iran being able to control it. I think the real issue is, I go back to what I said a little while ago, as long as people can come up with concepts and ideas and thought processes that are in everybody's best interest, they have a shot to be able to solve things. So with regards to this, we knew there were going to be tariffs, right? And we're aware of the tariffs. And I think the business community has built in the tariffs. We didn't know there was going to be a war with Iran.
Right.
We didn't know 3 months ago oil was trading at $65 a barrel, $60 a barrel. I know it was hit 57, 58. Now it's $100, $104 a barrel. So that's an issue. So we got to solve. The problem is to solve what's going on with the Iranian crisis. That's the problem. Not talking about all this other bullshit. That's what's got to happen.
To your point, Brent crude at 104, the Strait of Hormuz, and your gas tank, we understand that crude hit $104 a barrel this week, as you mentioned, with some reports saying up to $107 a barrel. 1/5 of the world's oil and gas supply goes through that strait. It remains a state of competing blockades. Like you say, Coach, this is a major win for the president and for the world if we can get this thing open and try to massage this so everybody takes something away but doesn't get everything they want. Somebody's going to have to give up something. And it seems like hopefully this meeting with Xi and President Trump will get that open so we can have a great celebration. 250th anniversary of our country. It'd be nice to have something to really cheer about. And this would be a major win for the president and for all of us.
I agree, Jamie. I agree. If Trump can accomplish something with Xi on that topic, that would be great.
And then I did want to ask you about another war, Israel and Lebanon war, the deal killer nobody's talking about. The whole peace process with Iran, Israel has continued bombing Lebanon despite a ceasefire, killing more than 500 people since April 16th. Iran has made it clear that a deal is politically impossible if Hezbollah is still under sustained attack. How do you ask and demand things when you've been obliterated to a large degree? I mean, I know they may have people helping them on the back end, but how can they, I guess it's just them being bombastic, saying, hey, we want this or we're going to do this. And you're going to, I mean, they're really not in a place to dictate, but they're throwing it all out there and demanding left and right. Your thoughts on what they're doing and their approach?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair for them to ask for whatever they want. They can demand all they want. I mean, we can demand all we want. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to get it. I think the issue in my head with Israel is that unless Israel is able to wipe out Hezbollah, they're always going to look at them as a threat. They live on each other's border, and they're going to continue to attack it. Now, the United States might very well work out a deal with the whole Iranian issue.
Right.
But I can see Israel, well, I'm not going to sign up for that. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Right.
Then if that's a deal killer, then Trump's got to be able to go and got to convince Netanyahu that this is in Israel's best interest. And he'll probably be able to do that.
We found out the Fed is trapped after the hot CPI and PPI numbers this week. The odds of a Fed rate hike have surged dramatically, wiping out all hopes for a rate cut in 2026. 10-year Treasury yield is touching its highest level of the year at 4.48%. Joe, the Fed is now caught between fighting inflation, managing the war-driven oil shock, and keeping the economy from tipping into recession. If you were Chairman Powell, what would you do about this situation to try to stem the tide?
I think I would have already probably made decisions that they had not made yet. So today I might make a different decision than what I may have. So I don't know if I would have been able to stem the tide at all. I think all eyes now are on Warsh. And I have little doubt that when he was given the job, it wasn't because he said he would succumb to the president's desires. It was because he was able to come up with a theory as to why, because of the productivity of AI, it's so significant. That's going to offset the inflation issues and inflation cares. Therefore, we're going to be able to cut rates. My guess is when he first gets on the job, he'd want to take a little time in the job. I don't see him raising rates.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, the market, I think, is calling for a hike between now and the end of the year, probably in the fourth quarter. I still think with Warsh, we won't see that. I think we'll probably see an easing. But the bottom line is, if he communicates anywhere near what Powell did, when Powell told you how he felt that Wednesday, every 6 weeks, it was very, very clear.
Right.
He's concerned about this, and that's the way he acted. So the market kept saying, well, the market's predicted this, the market predicted this. This is what the guy said. And to me, it was like really common sense. I'm listening to the guy, here's what he says, and then everybody's telling me what all the people in the market say. Well, watch the guy that runs the Fed, hear what he has to say, and he seems to do what he says he's going to do, either right or wrong.
Here's one question I really wanted to find out what you thought. The tariff refunds, $166 billion back to businesses. But now what? The Supreme Court struck down the broad Liberation Day tariffs as unconstitutional, and now the government has to refund $166 billion to more than 330,000 businesses. But Trump immediately imposed a new 10% global baseline tariff the very same day under a different law, good through July 24th. For the CEOs and business owners that are watching our program, what does this level of policy whiplash do in terms of long-term investment planning, hiring, and growth? And how can companies navigate it? You went through so much at TD Ameritrade. How would you approach this with the, of course, $166 billion back to businesses?
I can appreciate when no one was thinking about how serious inflation was, or when oil was $65 a barrel. But with regard to the Fed, I mean, we should have a reasonable idea what the Fed's going to do, but we can't bet everything on that. We can't bet on a hike or a cut. We've got to do what we think makes sense, lean in the area that think the highest probability. But at the end of the day, you assess your risk reward and you start to make decisions. I think too many times, go back to the greatest example I've got is the financial crisis in 2008. Wall Street blamed everybody else. They blamed the mortgage area, they blamed the rating agencies, they blamed everybody else for what wound up taking place. But the reality was, it was simply a matter of greed and power. And that's what it was. And at the end of the day, nobody was really ever held accountable. Now, a couple of firms went out of business, but nobody had to give back a bonus. Nobody wound up going to jail. And so you got to anticipate. We have COVID. And everybody in the world buying a Peloton. Well, you can't assume everybody's going to buy a Peloton for the next 5 years. So that's where a lot of executives make excuses, which to me is the opposite of BAM. And therefore, they have reasons for why they fail. Well, maybe they should have factored some of those reasons in and never have allowed it to get nearly as bad as it became.
We're going to head to Wall Street. The Dow retakes 50,000, of course, markets at record highs. This is something I really wanted to get your take on, because with the Dow closing back to 50,000, the S&P 500 hit a new record of 7501, NASDAQ hit an all-time high at 26,635. This is happening on the one hand while inflation is hot, as we all know, oil near $105 a barrel, active war. As a former CEO who understands markets as well as anybody, how do you square the record high in the stock market with everything else that's going on in the world right now? What do you do in terms of your mindset, your approach with all of this minutia everywhere? How do you approach this?
The reason why we have record highs, all led by technology, all led by AI, all led by memory, all those things going on. And the pace at which AI will function will give us productivity, the likes of which we've never, ever had in the history of our country. So that's what's leading this. Now, on the side, if it weren't for the Iranian crisis, I'd be incredibly, incredibly bullish, and I want to be as heavily invested as I could. Then you have geopolitical tension aside from that, where that there is inflation, but the way you handle inflation is through growth, and we could very well have that with the emphasis on technology right now. So, having said all that, I don't think, because there are other risks that surely none of us have any control over. I think into strength, it's always a good risk management tool to trim your portfolio. So you're at the highs, okay? That means you should be have some things in your portfolio doing very, very well. Maybe it's time to trim some of those, not sell them all, not start to go crazy and write derivatives, but it's always it's never a bad thing to trim into strength.
Leads us into where should the everyday investors be tonight with the rate hikes and $104 oil currently? If someone's sitting at home right now with the 401k open on their computer, when you look around, you've been a big follower and supporter of Kathy Wood ARC. We know that program. We know NVIDIA. You're part of that. And you've been leaning the shows we've heard as of late. It's all been AI, and that's great advice because they've been doing great. Where would you, besides the AI, is there any place else, tech stocks you've been big on as well? Where else would you tell people to maybe start looking or designate some of their funds?
So you began by asking a question: where should you be tonight? What should you be doing tonight if you're sitting home at your couch? And so the first thing I think you think about is maybe taking a look at reruns of Billions. Okay, that would be a worthwhile thing. Or you might want to put on some music. That might be a good idea, but you don't want to worry too much right now about your portfolio. I think at the end of the day, again, I would trim it. My risk management tools, I trim into strength, and I buy on weakness. I buy on weakness with the cash that I've used when I've trimmed. I think, but going forward, I think because of the crisis in the Middle East, it's probably good. I've not said this up until the last couple of months. I think it's good to own energy. It's good to own liquid natural gas, and it's good to own the oil stocks. Some of the more aggressive ones, as well as some of the Chevrons of the world or the Exxons of the world. I think I know that. I think you got to buy tech. You have to own technology. You have to, period. You have to own technology. If you just buy the Magnificent Seven over a long period of time, I think you're going to be fine. If you want to get too cute, I wouldn't get too cute. I would own the Magnificent Seven. And then for some of the companies that are a little bit more not quite there yet, that's where I buy ARC B. Not ARC B, that's Bitcoin. I'd buy ARC K or ARC Q, one of Kathy Wood's funds. That's the stuff she buys it. That's the stuff that should be good for us, 3, 4, 5 years from now. She had an incredible track record. And then I'll probably own some financials.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm not Joe Moglia, but I did stay at the Holiday Inn last. No, I'm just kidding. Folks, I never give advice because we have the world's greatest here. But I did notice something, and I'm sure you noticed it. Well, copper, in terms of commodities, is at a 3-month high. When you look at copper, forecasters are saying it could hit $8 a pound over the next 3 to 5 years, driven by electrification and infrastructure demand. Your thoughts on copper as a sleeper? Are you keeping your eye on copper?
Well, I think the fact that the markets, if I don't have a perspective, the market, I simply kind of believe what the market's telling us. And if the price of copper is so low, Jamie, is that what you said?
No, it's actually increasing now.
So high, so
right, 3-month high, actually, right now.
So high. It's making it very, very clear that the demand now for copper, I mean, for example, these AI-powered driven data centers, I'm sure they need a ton of copper to be able to, we need copper, building construction, right. So many, many, many different things. So I think, though, AI will also help find more efficient uses of copper down the road, maybe find an alternative for copper down the road. But like I said, when I don't have a specific perspective, we look at the markets, the fact that the price has been doing well, not poorly,
Right.
well, is because there's been a great demand for it. There's a great demand for it because there's a reason people need to use it.
All right. Turning the page to the sports page, the NBA playoffs, Cavaliers stunned the Pistons in game five. Have you been watching the Cavaliers, the Spurs, any of the NBA action? Is there one team that kind of caught your attention? You're like, the Lakers have been bounced out. Is there one team, one player out there you're watching? You're like, I really like this squad. They really impressed me.
But if you think about some of the players that play for the Cavaliers, and some of them, I think that they play together. I think really, really well as a team. I think in the beginning of the season that nobody expected them to be here where they are today.
Right.
They're playing, I think, the number one seed in the playoffs as far as the NBA goes. So that's kind of plus. I like people in Ohio, so I don't mind rooting for Cleveland.
Well, the OKC Thunder, another team coach, defending that world champions, have not lost yet, so they're rolling right along.
Oh, they're tough. No, they're tough.
They're tough, and they play together. I think you said it.
I think they're the best team in the NBA.
NHL. I love NHL hockey, playoff hockey. The Hurricanes swept their way. They haven't lost yet in the playoffs. Is there one team you've looked at and maybe caught them and said, "Hey, watch these guys"? Love the drop into the gloves, coach, by the way. Love all the physical aspect. Nothing like playoff hockey, as you well know.
I think, Jamie, I like the Hurricanes. I think they're good. I think they got good balance. I think they're good on defense. I think their power play team is good. Give them a little bit of an edge. But, again, we know anything can happen in playoffs. But the fact that you play multiple games at least allows you more of a chance that the better team should come out on top.
All right. And I want to turn our attention to BAM. Coach, I thought about it since our last conversation and show, and I've talked to a couple of people. I said, you know what? He should do this. Have you thought about doing a documentary or a book of BAM to where it could be something? And I only need 10% by bringing this up, by the way, just so you know. But book of BAM, I think it could be something that not only colleges, but people around the world, you could translate it in any different language. It all works out well. Your thoughts?
The book of BAM sounds like a book from the Bible. Sounds like one of the Bible verses.
The book of Joe.
Jamie, I think you're aware of this, that there are three books kind of always wanted to do. I wanted to do, when I was a football coach first time, I really wanted to do a book on football. When I got to Ameritrade, our mission was to bring financial literacy to families' country. That's why I wanted to do a book on that. But I think my single probably greatest competitive advantage has been, I think, what my leadership ability is, and that's based on BAM as a principle. So I want to do a book on leadership. Well, I've done that. So been under contract for about a year and a half on this. The manuscript was finished about a couple of weeks ago. It's going through the editing process now, but there'll probably be released sometime in the first quarter, 27th. But that book will be about leadership.
That's awesome because, people wanting to know, when I tell people the $26 billion sale, so many people are like, wow, can you imagine putting that deal together? And I'm like, yeah, we'd love to see what your mindset was, what your thought process. We hope that's all going to be in there. We know it is, but we're so excited to learn about how you did this. I mean, the road traveled from, Joe in the neighborhood and the fruit stand all the way to pulling that. That's why I'm so excited. Just the road, and for people to, when they see you and learn about the story, they're just going to be blown away to see.
I think you were talking about two different things. You're talking about some of my own history, my own biography, or you're talking about principles of leadership.
Yep.
Right. So in the leadership, this is a leadership book. So that leadership, I am sure that there are multiple examples of kind of TD Ameritrade, probably something from Merrill Lynch, probably something from, I'm sure, from Coastal, football, et cetera. I don't think negotiating the TD Ameritrade Schwab transaction would be part of that. I don't think so, but I only say that because there were a lot of things you looked at before you actually kind of finalize what you're going to put into the book.
There's a lot to put in there. We're excited to see the book and the movie. We can't wait, which leads us to Joe's closing advice for the week ahead. Of course, we covered it all tonight, the Trump-Xi summit, of course, the fragile peace deals, the AI boom. We've covered BAM and playoff hockey. We've got everything out there. We've got a world that's kind of on edge here waiting for all of this to happen in terms of the Strait of Hormuz. What's on your plate? What's your best advice for the week ahead, Coach?
I think when you think about the most significant thing going on in the world right now is the Iranian crisis. And you've got two of the top leaders in the world kind of meeting together for the next few days, along with business executives, I'm sure cabinet members from both countries. I think, while we live in the greatest country in the world, there are a lot of things going on around the world that is not in our best interest. So I think this is a time to be meditative. This is a time to be self-reflective. I think this is a time to be grateful for the country that we happen to live in, as opposed to some of these other countries. At the end of the day, for those that believe, you say a prayer that something really truly positive comes out of this China-U.S. meeting, and because we want to bring this to an end. Every day somebody's being killed. It's not great for the world economy, and but it's not okay for people to hate other people and want to wipe them out. That's the reason why that crisis exists today. So I would say it's a matter of perspective and the way people think about it.
Couldn't say it any better. And by the way, with the 250th anniversary of our country, we really need a big win, and we need to unite, which Coach always talks about. Coach, thank you so much. And we'll learn more about one of the world's greatest business leaders, not to mention a many times over Hall of Fame football coach. All you have to do is go to Moglia.com. That's Moglia.com for interviews, highlights, articles, and the latest and greatest when it comes to Joe Moglia. Coach, great seeing you again, and we'll see you again next time on the Joe Moglia Podcast.
Thanks, Jamie. All the best, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Joe Moglia Podcast. Reminding you to learn more about Joe by going to the sensational Joe Moglia website at Moglia.com. That's Moglia.com. That's Moglia.com. When you visit the website, you'll be able to learn more about Joe's schedule of appearances on CNBC as well as other speaking and television appearances. You can also read all of Joe's incredible articles featured in Forbes magazine. For Hall of Fame coach Joe Moglia, producer-director Rob Matea, and Joe Moglia podcast host Jamie King,